Welcome back to the channel. Imagine traveling across the wild Kansas prairie in the year 1883, only to stop at a lonely homestead where a brave widow is struggling to repair a broken fence all by herself. What starts as a simple act of kindness soon turns into an unexpected friendship, heartfelt moments, and a life-changing love story. Stay with us to discover how one broken fence brought two lonely souls together and changed their futures forever. Before we begin, please take a moment to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you never miss another inspiring story. Now grab a seat, relax, and let's get started. Part 1, 1800s USA Story, 500 Words. The year was 1883. And the vast plains of Kansas stretched endlessly beneath a sky so wide it seemed to swallow the horizon. Life on the frontier was never easy. Every day brought new challenges, harsh weather, long hours of labor, and the constant struggle to survive. I had spent most of my life drifting from ranch to ranch, earning my living with honest work and strong hands. Wherever there was a fence to mend, a barn to build, or cattle to drive, I could usually find employment. That autumn, after finishing a cattle job near Dodge City, I set out alone toward another settlement. The wind carried the scent of dry grass across the prairie, and dark clouds gathered in the distance. A storm had passed through the region only days earlier, leaving behind broken trees and damaged homesteads. As I rode along a dusty trail, I noticed a small farmhouse standing alone on a gentle rise. Several cattle wandered near the property, and from a distance I could see that much of the fence surrounding the pasture had collapsed. Curious, I guided my horse closer. Near the broken fence worked a woman dressed in a faded brown dress and a worn bonnet. She struggled to lift a heavy fence post from the ground. Despite her effort, the post barely moved. Sweat covered her brow, and her hands were stained with dirt. I dismounted and approached carefully. "Ma'am," I called, tipping my hat. "Looks like you could use a little help." The woman looked up cautiously. Life on the frontier taught people not to trust strangers too quickly. "I appreciate the offer," she replied, "but I can manage." Even from her tone, I could hear the exhaustion she tried to hide. I glanced at the damaged fence. Nearly 20 yards of it needed replacing. "With respect," I said, "that storm did quite a number on this place. One person could spend a week fixing all this." For a moment, she hesitated before finally sighing. "My name is Martha Wilson," she said. "My husband passed away 3 years ago. Since then, this farm has been mine alone." "I'm James Carter," I answered, "just a ranch hand passing through." She studied me for a moment before nodding. "Well, Mr. Carter, if you truly wish to help, I'd be grateful. We got to work immediately. The damaged posts had to be removed and replaced. Some were buried deep in the hard earth, requiring all my strength to pull them free." Martha worked beside me without complaint, carrying rails and gathering tools. Though clearly tired, she refused to sit idle. As the hours passed, I learned more about her life. She had inherited the homestead after her husband's death in Part 2, 1800s USA Story, 500 Words. Martha's words stayed with me long after the sun disappeared beyond the Kansas prairie. As I rode away from her homestead that evening, I told myself she had simply been thanking me for my help. Yet something in her voice suggested there was more behind those words. The next morning, I found myself thinking about her farm instead of continuing my journey. By noon, I turned my horse around and headed back toward Martha's property. When I arrived, she was standing on a ladder, trying to repair loose boards on the barn wall. The sight made me laugh. "You certainly know how to keep a man busy," I called. Martha looked down and smiled. "And you certainly know how to show up when help is needed." From that day forward, I spent much of my time at the homestead. There was always work to do. We repaired sections of the barn damaged by years of neglect. We cleared fallen trees left behind by storms and strengthened the livestock pens before winter arrived. The days were long, but they passed quickly in Martha's company. She possessed a quiet strength I admired deeply. Many people would have abandoned such a difficult life after losing their spouse, but she had stayed and fought for every acre of that land. As autumn turned colder, our friendship grew stronger. We shared meals after long days of work and talked beside the fireplace in the evenings. Martha told me stories about her childhood in Missouri and how she and her husband had traveled west to build a better life. One night, while snow drifted against the cabin windows, she spoke about the loneliness she had carried since her husband's death. "Some days," she admitted softly, "the silence in this house felt heavier than any burden I had to carry." I understood more than she realized. Though I had never married, years of wandering from place to place had left me lonely too. "You're stronger than most people I've known," I told her. She smiled sadly. "Even strong people get tired, James." Winter settled across Kansas, covering the prairie in white. Despite the cold, the farm thrived. The repaired fences held firm, the livestock remained safe, and the barn stood stronger than it had in years. By the time spring arrived, the fields began turning green again. Wildflowers appeared along the edges of the pasture, and the harsh season finally loosened its grip. One warm afternoon, Martha and I stood beside the very fence where we had first met months earlier. The cattle grazed peacefully nearby. She looked across the land and smiled. "This place feels different now," she said. "How so?" "It feels like a home again." For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then Martha reached for my hand. Before I could say anything, she continued. "When you first arrived, I thought you were just another traveler passing through. I never imagined you would become the person I looked forward to seeing every day." My heart pounded as I squeezed her hand gently. "I stopped being a traveler the moment I met you," I replied. Tears filled her eyes as she smiled. That summer, surrounded by neighbors and friends, we were married beneath the open Kansas sky. The widow who once struggled alone and the ranch hand with no place to call home finally found what they had both been searching for. And it all began with a broken fence and a simple act of kindness, fought every day to keep it running. Many neighbors had moved away, leaving her with little assistance. By late afternoon, dark clouds returned. We hurried to finish another section of fence before the weather changed. Thunder rumbled across the prairie as we drove the final post into place. When the work was finally done for the day, Martha stepped back and admired the repaired fence. A gentle smile appeared on her face for the first time. Then she looked at me and quietly said, "Mr. Carter, I need a strong man like you around here." The words hung in the cool evening air, and suddenly I realized this broken fence might be the beginning of a story neither of us expected.